Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Tool Man and special guest Paul. So what we're going to do today is Paul was able to break off one of his lug nut studs on his vehicle. I don't know if he's been taking steroids or pumping iron, but somehow he was able to break one of his studs off. And Paul did some research online and found it's not that uncommon that some people break studs on their vehicles. Now, Paul has a 5th gen 2013 4Runner. He broke the stud off. He bought a new stud. It's got knurls on it. What we have to do is we have to somehow press the old broken one out or knock it out with a hammer and then pull a new one in. And so we went to Home Depot and we got some washers. The reason for the washers is see, there's not threads all the way through, so you need something to take up this gap with some washers so you now can fit it in and then draw it in with your lug nut, or if you had another nut. We went to Home Depot and we couldn't find the right size nut. This is a M12 1.5 pitch, and Home Depot only had a M12 1.75 pitch, so we couldn't find a regular nut. So we're just going to use the lug nut to draw the new one in. So the washers take up that space where there's no thread so you can draw the new one back into the hub. Now, the hangups that you could probably have with this is that getting the new one in, there's not enough room on the back side. So he broke a front one off. So maybe there's not enough room to fit it in. So until we get the thing taken apart, we're gonna find out if there was enough room to get it in. If there's not enough room to get in, we're probably gonna stop right there and not deal with it, because that means we have to remove the whole hub off and press it out of the bearing in order to have room to pull this thing in. So we're hoping that's not the case. We're going to remove the brake caliper, we're going to remove the rotor, we're going to get the old lug nut stud out, and then we're going to draw a new one in. Let me show you some pages on the factory service manual. It shows right here, front wheel hub bolt replacement. You remove the wheel, you remove the brake line bracket from the steering knuckle, you remove the brake caliper and disc. And then you remove the hub bolt, and they show a special service tool right here. We don't have a special service tool, but I'm thinking maybe I could use a ball joint press to press that out. So we'll see what I can do. If not, then I'm just going to knock it out with a hammer and a brass drift. And then it shows drawing it in, and they're using something to take up that gap and then drawing it in. So that's how it shows how to do it. So that's all the factory service manual pages you need. Here's this truck. And right here, this is where he's broke one off. So we're gonna get it into the garage now. We're gonna jack up only this passenger side. We're gonna get the wheel off, get the caliper out of the way, get the rotor off, and then hopefully we'll see that we can fit a new lug nut stud in without having to remove the hub itself. We've got the truck jacked up on the passenger side. We got it supported by 6-ton jack stand. We have the hydraulic jack in place on the frame, just as a backup. And then we have one of the rear tires chalked fore and aft, just so the vehicle can move in. We've got the parking brake set. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to get the wheel off. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get this brake caliper off, and then we're going to get the rotor off and then see what we got. I think the first thing I'm going to do is going to remove this bracket for the brake line off of the knuckle. This way I can swing this whole assembly and hang it somewhere out of the way, because we're not disconnecting any brake lines. We just want to move this whole assembly out of the way so we have room to work. So this fastener is a 12 millimeter. I'm going to zip it off with my new little tool here. It's DeWalt 883, a 3/8 drive impact gun. So let's see how well it works. So far it's worked pretty good. Yeah, just like downtown. This thing's pretty powerful and it gets into tighter spots, so that's why I bought it. So remove that. Now that brake line's free, and now I'm going to work on getting the 2 caliper bolts off. It's a 17. Okay, so let's see if this gun will get in there. Ah, there's enough room. Let's see if it works. Maybe not. Not powerful enough. We're going to have to use it the regular way with a breaker bar. So I just have a long 17 millimeter with like a little over a foot long breaker bar. See if I can get these loose. There we go, that's loose. And that one's loose. Now I can get them with the gun. I got to get something ready to hang this with, so I'm going to get a piece of baling wire and then just figure out a good place to hang this out of the way. So now that I got a piece of baling wire ready to go, maybe we could just hang it right there. Possibly. Okay. So now I'll take the bolts out all the way that I'm ready to capture it with something. Okay, so, and it looks like I have to remove that ABS sensor because it's pulling on, that's a 10. So that one's loose and out of the way. Now it's another 10 millimeter there. You can pull the ABS sensor out, so then the whole thing will be free. And then the ABS sensor's out now. This is your ABS sensor that goes into the hub. Now it's completely free. Now I can move the caliper where I want it. There we go. So, got my baling wire, hook it through a hole here, the bowl hole, loop it through here, and you just want to hang it to where you're not putting any strain on the line. So I've got it hung enough to where it's not, well, it's putting strain on the ABS line. Let me hang that up higher. There we go. It was putting a little strain on the ABS line, so now the baling wire is fully supporting the weight of the caliper, and there's no weight on the brake line or on the ABS line. Now we're going to get the rotor off. Maybe it'll just pull off. Maybe it won't. We'll have to give it a little bit of persuasion. I just got this plastic dead blow hammer, Harbor Freight Special. Just going to tap on it, try to break it free. Not moving. Okay. Maybe I got to get a different hammer. The rotors will sometimes get stuck onto the hub, so I got this brass hammer. I'm just going to tap around here and see if I can break it loose. This is really stuck for a newer vehicle, you know what I mean? Yeah. There we go. Shit. I don't know what I did, but I finally got it loose. Maybe a little persuasion. Okay. So we finally got the rotor free. So this is where the rotor could get kind of locked onto the hub. So since his was a newer vehicle and it was already kind of locked on there, I think I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on this when we reassemble it, so it'll be less likely to get locked on there again. So here's the broken stud right here. And then now the key is there going to be enough room to fit a new one behind there? All right, so it looks like the ball joint press idea is going to work. So I just have the C-press with no adapter on the backside to give the stud somewhere to go. I have a 9mm 1/4" drive socket to do the pressing of the stud out, and so the spindle is just going to put pressure on the 9mm 1/4" drive socket and drive it into the hole on the C-press. Just like down. That was it. Shoot. That wasn't hard. Could have probably knocked it off with a hammer because this thing's pretty burly hub, but we did it the safest way by pressing it out with a press. Now we just got to see if we can get the new one in. Will it fit in? Ah, perfect. That was easy. It fits in fine. So now we grab our washers. It almost looks like you don't even need the washers because the threads go all the way against the hub, but we'll play it safe anyways. We'll put a couple washers on there. And then we're going to use the lug nut to draw it in. So I just got to get my 21mm. We have a guy with a blower in the background, so we apologize for that, but we got to get this thing done. Time is of the essence. So you're going to see that by tightening on the lug nut, it's going to draw that knurled stud into the hub. So I just got a big 1/2" drive. It's not even taking that much force. I thought maybe I'd have to hold this steady with something else, but I'm just using my arm strength with my left hand to hold it steady, and it's drawing it in. maybe a little bit of extra force. When you meet a lot of resistance, which I do, I see that there's no more gap here between the knurled stud and the hub body, so it's fully seated. So now you just take your lug nut off. Take your washers off, and you've successfully replaced a wheel stud on a 5th Gen 4Runner. Now, what I was getting at before is that sometimes you're not so lucky with the design of the vehicle and you can't fit the stud in, so you either alter the dust shield, maybe you can loosen it and take it out of the way, but I've seen where people bend it or cut a section out so they have room to get the stud in. Worst case scenario, you have to remove the whole knuckle and press this hub out of the bearing. So we had no problem, it fit in just like downtown. So we just get the rotor back on, get the caliper back on, get the ABS wire brackets reconnected and the brake line bracket reconnected to the knuckle, put the wheel back on, we're done. So let's get the rotor back on. When you get the rotor back on, it's helpful to put a couple lug nuts, just kind of hold it, because you see how it wants to fall out. So get a couple lug nuts and kind of secure it against the hub while you're getting your brake caliper back on. So just hand tight. Now I'm going to undo the baling wire here. Your pads might move on you a little bit. Just pull them back out against the pistons. Slide the sucker on. Okay. Get the bolt started. So sometimes the rotor won't be fully seated, so you have to push it back in a little bit more, use your lug nuts to draw it in further, and then you'll find that you could get the caliper over the rotor and then your bolt holes lined up, and then you get your 2 bolts back connected. And then just cinch them up and then we'll torque them. Did you have to look up a torque spec for these?
I did not.
Okay, so Timmy the Toolman is just going to use a torque spec for a 3rd Gen 4Runner. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's 90, but I'll double check. So I'm just cinching these up with a 17mm 1/2-inch drive ratchet. When I get them snug, then I'll break out the torque wrench and torque them up. Okay, that one, bottom one snug, top one snug. Now I'll torque them. So Timmy the Toolman doesn't have dementia yet, because I was right, it's 90 foot-pounds. So just torquing these to 90 foot-pounds. It's a little bit hard to get leverage in here, but maybe a shorter torque wrench would have been better. Okay, those are torqued to 90 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to get the bracket for the brake reconnected and the brackets for the ABS reconnected. So I'm going to get this bolt that holds the brake bracket to the knuckle in place. Don't have a torque spec for this. I'm just going to cinch it up nice and tight. So I just got my impact socket with this cute little shorty 3/8 drive from Gear Wrench. Pretty nice with 120 clicks. So it's just holding a little bracket on. Does it have to be cranked on? No. Do I need a torque spec for this? No. I'm just cinching it up tight, choking up on this little shorty. That's good enough. Now I'll get the ABS ones connected. So first one I'm going to get back on is this bracket right here for the ABS sensor line. I'm just going to screw it in, and same thing, I'm not going to bother with a torque spec. I'm just going to cinch it up snug. And that's good. The last one is for the actual ABS sensor. It's got to slide back into the hole to take a reading from the ABS gear inside there. Slide the sensor back in. There we go. and that's good. These are kind of handy. It's got this little ratcheting jobber too, so they're kind of a handy wrench. So that is it. Just make sure you got everything back together. We've got the ABS sensor back in. We've got the ABS bracket hooked back up. We've got the brake line bracket hooked back up. We've got the caliper bolts torqued to spec. Now all we got to do is get the wheel back on and then torque the wheel lug nuts to 85 foot-pounds. And we'll be done with this job. Okay, so I'll give you a Timmy the Toolman trick that I learned long ago when I was working at a Chevron station. If you're working on a vehicle that's on the ground, not on a lift, these wheels are kind of heavy, so you kind of brace your legs around the wheel, and then you kind of put your forearms against your legs, and then you have a firm platform to kind of lift up with your legs and your arms to get the wheel onto the lugs. Other than that, if you're leaning over and trying to lift it, you're putting a lot of strain on your back. So if you get on the ground, get your forearms against your legs and kind of bring everything up together with your arms and your legs, it makes it easier to get the wheel back on. Pro tip from Timmy the Toolman. I didn't invent that, by the way. Okay, get your wheel lug nuts on. So once you got all your lug nuts snug, not overly tight, but just snug, then drop the vehicle to the ground and now torque your lug nuts. And 85 foot-pounds is a good torque spec for these. So here's where his stud broke. It broke like right at the beginning of the threads. I would venture to say that this is a manufacturing issue. I've never heard of anybody breaking a stud off unless, you know, they were really cranking on it. Paul said he was just using a regular lug nut tool, not jumping on the thing. He was just tightening it like he normally tightens a lug nut, and, you know, didn't have a torque wrench. But then again, it's like I've really cranked on lug nut bolts before I owned a torque wrench with a regular lug nut wrench. Never broke a stud. So something tells me in the manufacturing process of these studs, maybe something's wrong, because Paul, actually, you looked it up and you said that you've heard of it happening in other 5th gens?
That's correct.
Okay, so he did look it up and found out that other people with 5th gens had the same problem. So maybe something is wrong with the manufacturing on Toyota's end on these lug nut studs for the 5th gen 4Runners. So if you have a 5th gen and you're watching this, don't be surprised it doesn't happen to you, because really, unless, you know, he was using an impact gun with a lot of power, or he was like standing on top of the freaking lug nut wrench, I don't see why he would be able to break this off so easily. Something's not right. So there it is there. All right, we're done with the job. It was pretty simple. We think we lucked out that the way Toyota designed the front hubs, that there's enough room to get a new wheel lug nut stud in from the back, no problem. We didn't have to do any manipulation of any brake dust shield, or we didn't have to press the hub out of the bearing or anything crazy. It was pretty simple. Just use the ball joint press to press out the old stud, put the new stud in, put a couple washers on it, use the lug nut to draw it in with a 1/2-inch drive with a 21mm socket, and that was it. Done deal. You had to put everything back together, your caliper back on, your rotor back on, all the brake line brackets and the ABS line brackets, and it's good to go. If you wanted to do it the camera method, maybe if there's not enough stud showing, like on Paul's truck, there wasn't really any stud to actually hit on it from the outside, you could just use like a brass drift or some type of small chisel and then just knock it out like that, because those knurls aren't really holding that strongly in that hub body or the hub spindle. So you could use something like this. You didn't have to use a ball joint press. You could just use a punch or some type of brass drift, hammer it out, draw the other one back in like we showed you. So this is another option. Are you happy with the job, Paul?
Absolutely. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so it is once again another successful repair at Timmy the Toolman's garage. We thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and special guest Paul.
Bye.
And we'll be back with more videos. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If you're not subscribing yet, subscribe. You'll learn something, maybe, or maybe not. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.